The corporate tower's midnight stillness exploded as a janitor's voice thundered through the executive floor. "Don't get in the car." Catherine Sterling's breath caught, her perfectly manicured fingers freezing inches from the Tesla's sleek handle, her body rigid with shock in the underground garage's shadowy depths. The man in the worn cleaning uniform erupted from the darkness 20 feet away, his jaw clenched tight, eyes blazing with desperate certainty that transformed him from invisible servant into avenging guardian. Behind his protective stance, a small girl pressed against a concrete pillar, her tiny hands strangling a stuffed rabbit while terror carved itself across her innocent features. Then Catherine Sterling, the woman who'd never bowed to anyone, slowly turned, locked eyes with this man, and did something no CEO in Sterling Tech's history had ever done. Something that would force the entire company to rewrite every rule about who really mattered in this building. 3 hours earlier, Henry Thompson had been just another ghost in the corporate machine, pushing his cleaning cart through the 42nd floor of Sterling Tech Tower while Seattle's business elite worked late into the November night. The irony wasn't lost on him that 5 years ago, he'd commanded explosive ordnance disposal teams in Afghanistan, designing security protocols that protected lives across 3 combat zones. Now he mopped floors and emptied trash bins, invisible to the very executives whose safety he once would have overseen. But invisibility had become Henry's greatest asset. People said things around janitors they'd never dare voice to equals. Tonight felt different, though. Henry's combat-honed instincts prickled with the kind of unease that had kept him alive through 2 tours in Kandahar. The usual security guard, Pete Morrison, hadn't been at his station since 9 p.m. The executive bathroom trash had been emptied ahead of schedule, though Henry distinctly remembered it being full during his earlier round. Small details that meant nothing to most people but everything to someone trained to read the spaces between normalcy and danger. These weren't random oversights. They were deliberate preparations. 8-year-old Zoe slept peacefully in the maintenance break room, her dark curls spilling across Henry's spare jacket like ink on canvas. She'd finished her homework hours ago, reading 2 chapters ahead in her favorite book about a girl who solved mysteries with her detective father. The parallel wasn't lost on Henry. His daughter possessed the same sharp observation skills that had made him exceptional at spotting roadside bombs. She noticed things other children missed, asked questions that cut straight to the heart of adult mysteries. Tonight, she'd asked why the Dragon Lady stayed so late when she had a daughter too. Catherine Sterling's corner office blazed with light even at 11:43 p.m., her silhouette moving behind frosted glass like a restless panther pacing its cage. 3 years of night shifts had taught Henry her patterns with military precision. Well, she never left before 11:55, always took the private elevator to the underground garage, and never once acknowledged the man who cleaned up after her empire. But Henry had been watching, learning, understanding the weight of loneliness that drove successful people to work themselves into the grave. He recognized the signs because he'd lived them himself in those first months after Kelly's funeral. The private elevator chimed exactly at 11:47 p.m., and Catherine emerged with her usual sharp efficiency. Even approaching midnight, she looked untouchable in her charcoal suit, phone pressed to her ear, as she discussed quarterly projections with someone in their Singapore office. She'd built Sterling Tech from a garage startup into a $2 billion empire, and Henry respected that kind of relentless drive, even if it came at the cost of everything else. But respect didn't blind him to the subtle signs of exhaustion etched around her eyes, the way her shoulders carried invisible weight that no amount of success could lift. As Catherine disappeared into her office to gather her things, Henry's military training kicked into overdrive. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see her Tesla Model S waiting in its reserved spot 40 floors below, a sleek black beetle against the concrete. That's when he spotted movement in the parking garage shadows, not the random wandering of confused maintenance or the purposeful stride of legitimate security. This was tactical movement, someone who understood sight lines and cover positions, someone who knew how to accomplish objectives while remaining invisible. Henry pulled out his phone and accessed the building's security feed through his maintenance portal, zooming in on the parking garage with growing dread. The figure beneath Catherine's Tesla worked with professional precision, positioning tools and moving with the focused intensity Henry recognized from his EOD days. But it was the specific location that made his blood freeze. The person was working on the vehicle's undercarriage, exactly where a trained specialist would place a charge for maximum lethality. Near the fuel tank, protected by the car's frame, invisible from casual inspection. 7 years of disarming roadside bombs had given Henry an instinct for explosives that operated below conscious thought, and every alarm bell in his military-trained mind was screaming danger. The figure emerged from beneath the Tesla after exactly 7 minutes, enough time to install a sophisticated triggering device, and melted back into the parking garage's maze of concrete pillars like smoke. Henry's phone showed 11:52 p.m. Catherine Sterling maintained her schedule with Swiss precision. In her car by 11:55, engine started by 11:56, out of the garage by 11:57. Whoever had planned this assassination knew her habits as intimately as Henry did, which meant the threat came from inside her own organization. Someone with access, someone trusted, someone who understood that the most effective way to destroy a CEO was to make her death look like a tragic accident. "Zoe," Henry called softly, his voice carrying the controlled urgency he'd used to wake sleeping soldiers during night raids. "We need to go right now, sweetheart." His daughter's eyes opened immediately, instantly alert to the tension radiating from her father like heat from a furnace. 3 years of being raised by a man with combat reflexes had taught Zoe to trust her daddy's instincts, without question. She grabbed her stuffed rabbit and followed Henry toward the service elevator, her small hand finding his with absolute faith. Henry's keycard granted access to the utilitarian metal box that connected all floors for maintenance purposes, and soon they were descending through the building's skeleton toward whatever waited in the darkness below. The service elevator opened directly into the maintenance section of the parking garage, and Henry positioned Zoe behind a concrete support column with military efficiency. "Stay right here, baby girl. Don't move unless Daddy tells you to, okay? I need to check something very important." He could see Catherine's Tesla sitting exactly where it should, pristine and deadly under the harsh lighting. Henry approached with the methodical caution of someone trained to identify explosives, his engineer's eye cataloging fresh scratches on the undercarriage and the slightly skewed parking position that suggested the vehicle had been jacked up and lowered. Dropping to his stomach, Henry slid beneath the Tesla and confirmed his worst fears. Wired to the exhaust system with professional craftsmanship, sat enough C4 plastic explosive to vaporize the car and anyone within a 20-foot radius. The triggering mechanism was sophisticated, remote, detonated, probably activated by radio signal the moment the engine turned over, but it was the quality of the installation that made Henry's blood run cold. This wasn't amateur terrorism or desperate criminality. The wire routing, the placement, the redundant systems, this bomb had been built by someone with serious military or intelligence training. The private elevator chimed its arrival, and Henry could see Catherine walking toward her Tesla, with phone still pressed to her ear, discussing supply chain logistics, while death waited beneath her feet. Her heels echoed against concrete like a metronome counting down to 0. 50 feet, 40, 30. She was reaching for the door handle when Henry Thompson made the choice that would expose everything he'd tried to hide about who he used to be. His voice boomed across the parking garage like thunder, shattering the corporate calm with 3 words that carried the weight of life and death. "Don't get in the car!" Catherine spun toward the sound, her professional composure cracking for the first time in 3 years of late-night encounters. "Mr. Thompson, what are you—" But something in his tone, the authority that 3 years of janitorial work hadn't quite erased, cut through her disbelief. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am. Right now. There's an explosive device attached to your car." The words hung in the fluorescent-lit air between them, impossible, and true. Catherine's face went pale as she processed the information, her executive mind cataloging details. The child hiding behind the pillar, the protective stance of her night janitor, the absolute certainty in his voice when he said the word bomb. A bomb? Are you certain? Catherine's voice carried the careful modulation of someone processing life-threatening information while maintaining professional control. Military-grade C4, remote detonated, wired to trigger when you start the engine. Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle immediately and call 911. As Catherine fumbled for her phone with trembling hands, the parking garage's lights suddenly died. Emergency lighting kicked in 2 seconds later, casting everything in sickly green shadows that transformed familiar spaces into alien landscapes. Catherine's call to emergency services died before it connected. No signal. Someone had activated a cellular jammer. Henry's military training kicked into overdrive as he assessed their tactical situation. One primary exit, the vehicle ramp, now sealed by heavy security gates that had slammed shut with metallic finality. Service elevator, probably disabled from a central control panel. Emergency stairs, 40 floors to safety, through a building where someone clearly had administrative access to security systems. Ma'am, Henry said, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded explosive ordnance disposal teams. Whoever did this has been planning for contingencies. They know your schedule, they have access to building systems, and they've prepared for interference, including trapping us down here. Catherine's response carried an odd mixture of terror and professional admiration for the thoroughness of the plot against her. She studied Henry with new eyes, seeing past the janitor's uniform to the man beneath, the way he moved with tactical precision, the way he'd identified military-grade explosives without hesitation, the way he'd known instinctively that death waited beneath her car. You're not really a janitor, are you, Mr. Thompson? The question hung between them like a challenge, and Henry looked at his daughter before making another choice that would change everything. I am now. But 5 years ago, I was Staff Sergeant Thompson, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Specialist, 82nd Airborne Division. The confession settled around them like dust in abandoned rooms. And you're working here because? Catherine pressed, her executive mind needing to understand the full picture. Because my wife died in a car bomb meant for me. Because I decided that keeping Zoe safe mattered more than keeping my security clearance. Because invisible people see things that important people miss. The weight of shared loss hung between them, 2 people who'd sacrificed everything for the safety of those they loved. Catherine's phone buzzed against the concrete where she'd dropped it, the caller ID making her blood freeze. James Patterson, CFO. Don't answer it, Henry said immediately, but Catherine was already processing the implications. James had been pushing her to take certain meetings lately, asking about her evening schedule with unusual frequency, suggesting she park in the isolated executive section for security reasons. The phone stopped buzzing, then immediately started again with the persistence of someone who knew exactly where she was and what should be happening right now. He's been different lately, Catherine said, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. More aggressive about financial decisions, questioning my judgment on matters that never concerned him before. Henry's expression darkened as he connected the dots. Any idea why? Catherine's laugh held no humor whatsoever. The quarterly audit that's been keeping me awake for 3 weeks. The one that's revealed some significant irregularities in our overseas accounts. The kind of irregularities that could send someone to federal prison for 25 years, Henry realized. The kind that desperate people killed to keep hidden. Daddy, there are people by the stairs. Zoe's small voice cut through their conversation like a blade, and both adults froze. In the distance, barely visible in the emergency lighting, 3 figures moved through the parking garage shadows with military precision. Too far away to identify faces, but close enough to recognize lethal intent. Henry positioned himself between the approaching threat and Catherine, his protective instincts overriding everything else. Stay behind me, both of you. The figures moved with purpose, navigating the maze of parked cars with familiarity that spoke of careful planning and inside knowledge. Catherine's phone buzzed again, and this time she answered on speaker without being asked. "Catherine? Thank God." James Patterson's voice filled the parking garage, artificially amplified and strangely hollow. "I've been trying to reach you for 10 minutes. There's been a security breach. You need to get out of there immediately." The careful concern in his voice would have been convincing if Henry hadn't been trained to recognize deception under pressure. "Where are you, James?" Catherine asked, her executive instincts probing for inconsistencies. "Safe location. Emergency command post." "Catherine, listen very carefully. We have intelligence suggesting someone is targeting you tonight." "What's the name of the backup facility?" Catherine's question cut through James's manufactured urgency like a scalpel. The pause was too long, too calculated, and Henry watched understanding dawn across Catherine's features. James couldn't name the facility because there was no emergency backup plan, no safe house, no intelligence report. There was only a CFO who'd stolen $12 million and run out of options for covering his tracks. "I'm not getting in the car, James." The words echoed through the parking garage with finality. "I said no. I'm not going anywhere, and I think you know exactly why." The mask had finally slipped. When James Patterson's voice returned, all pretense of concern had evaporated, replaced by something uglier and more desperate. "You always were too smart for your own good, Catherine." The admission hung in the air like poison gas, confirming what they both now understood. The threat hadn't come from outside competitors or random criminals. It had come from within, from someone trusted, someone with access, someone who understood that the most effective betrayals were performed by those closest to power. The three figures in the distance had abandoned stealth for speed, moving toward them with the coordinated precision of a military operation. Henry's mind raced through tactical options while calculating distances and timing. The bomb beneath Catherine's car represented both their greatest danger and their only weapon. Remote detonated meant a triggering device somewhere nearby, probably within line of sight. If Henry could find it and modify the timing, they might be able to use the explosion to create enough chaos for law enforcement to locate them. It was desperate, dangerous, and might get them all killed, but it was better than waiting passively for James Patterson's cleanup crew to arrive. "Catherine, I need you to do exactly what I tell you," Henry said, his EOD training taking complete control. "Take Zoe and move to the far corner behind those concrete support pillars. Stay low, cover her ears, and don't move until I give the all clear." But Catherine Sterling surprised him again. Instead of following orders, she stepped closer to Henry and spoke words that would change both their lives forever. "Mr. Thompson, Henry, you don't understand. I can't let a child get hurt because of my mistakes. We're doing this together, or we're not doing it at all." The figures were close enough now for Henry to recognize the lead man, James Patterson himself, flanked by two professionals who moved with the fluid precision of ex-Special Forces contractors. Close enough to see the desperate resolution carved into James's features, the expression of a man who'd crossed too many lines to consider turning back. The CFO had stopped 20 feet away, close enough to be heard without shouting, far enough to maintain tactical advantage. "Catherine, Mr. Thompson, this really doesn't have to be difficult for anyone involved." Henry emerged from behind the concrete pillar with his phone held high, the device now connected to the bomb's triggering mechanism through a Bluetooth hack he'd learned during his military service. "Actually, Mr. Patterson, I think it does have to be difficult." The sight of the phone in Henry's hands made James's face cycle through disbelief, rage, and cold calculation as he processed the implications. "What's that device?" James demanded, though his tactical training had already provided the answer. "Remote trigger for your bomb." Turns out military EOD specialists know a few tricks about hijacking radio signals and redirecting explosive devices. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't detonate an explosive with your daughter 10 feet away." James's voice carried the confidence of someone who believed he understood his opponent's limitations. "You're absolutely right. I wouldn't," Henry replied calmly, his thumb hovering over the trigger mechanism. "But I'd sure as hell make certain you don't walk away from this either." The standoff stretched across the parking garage like a tightrope, with death balanced on both sides of a single decision. That's when they all heard it, the distant wail of sirens approaching fast, growing louder with each passing second. "Seattle PD response time for bomb threats," Henry said conversationally, never taking his eyes off James Patterson. 7 minutes and 43 seconds. Not bad for a Tuesday night in November. The sirens were close enough now to identify individual vehicles, patrol cars, emergency response units, and the heavy rumble of the bomb squad's armored truck. James's tactical composure was cracking under the pressure of a timeline that had spiraled completely out of his control. Whatever his original plan had been, standing around a parking garage engaging in philosophical debates, while police sirens grew louder, hadn't been part of it. Catherine Sterling stepped into the space between Henry and James, her executive presence commanding attention even in a life-or-death standoff. "You're out of time, James. Choose now. Try to kill 3 people, and hope you escape before a dozen patrol cars arrive. Or take the money and disappear while you still can." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations where millions of dollars hung on every word. "What money?" James asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "The $12 million you stole from our pension fund, plus another $8 million I'm prepared to transfer as severance pay." The offer hung in the air between them like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Henry watched James's face as greed warred with desperation, calculating whether Catherine's proposal represented genuine escape or elaborate trap. The sirens were practically on top of them now, echoing through the building's structure as emergency vehicles filled the street above. James said slowly, "You'll really let me disappear?" Catherine's response carried the weight of absolute authority. "On one condition. You never come back. You never contact anyone from your old life. You never threaten anyone I care about." The phrase "anyone I care about" resonated through the parking garage with unexpected emotional weight. Henry felt Catherine's words settle around him and Zoe like protective armor, a CEO's public declaration that their lives mattered to her. It was more than professional courtesy or crisis-induced gratitude. It was genuine human connection, forged in the crucible of shared danger. James Patterson looked at his companions, who were already backing toward the shadows with the professional instinct of contractors who recognized when a job had gone beyond salvage. "The offshore accounts will be transferred within 6 hours," Catherine continued, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "You'll have enough money to disappear completely and live comfortably for the rest of your life. But if you ever surface again, if you ever threaten anyone connected to this company or this family, I'll make sure you spend whatever years you have left in federal prison." The threat carried absolute conviction, backed by the resources of a woman who'd built an empire and wouldn't hesitate to defend the people she claimed as her own. James Patterson stared at the bomb trigger in Henry's hand one final time, weighing outcomes and calculating probabilities. The sound of tactical boots in the building's stairwells above made the decision for him, Seattle PD's bomb squad, moving fast and professionally through 40 floors of corporate architecture. "This isn't over," he said, but his words lacked conviction. "Yes," Catherine replied with absolute finality. "It is." James melted into the shadows with his companions, choosing survival over vengeance, money over murder. The parking garage fell silent except for the approaching thunder of law enforcement and the gentle hum of ventilation systems that seemed to whisper promises of safety. Henry's phone still held the bomb trigger, but somehow the need for it had passed. "It's over," Catherine said softly, and for the first time in 3 years, Henry actually believed her. The next 4 hours blurred together in a kaleidoscope of flashing lights, tactical teams, and endless questions from investigators who seemed amazed that a janitor had successfully identified and neutralized a sophisticated corporate assassination plot. Seattle PD's bomb squad defused the C4 with professional efficiency that reminded Henry of his military days, while FBI agents took over the investigation and immediately focused on James Patterson's financial crimes and subsequent disappearance. Homeland Security became involved when the explosive device was traced to military-grade sources that suggested international black market connections. Through it all, Catherine Sterling sat in the back of an ambulance with Zoe curled up beside her, sharing a blanket and hot chocolate provided by EMTs who'd seen enough trauma to recognize the healing power of human contact. Henry watched them from across the parking garage as he gave his statement to Detective Martinez, noting how naturally Catherine had adapted to having an 8-year-old attached to her side. "So let me understand this correctly," the detective said, reviewing his notes with the expression of someone trying to reconcile impossible facts. 3 years of emptying trash cans gave you enough intelligence to identify an assassination plot? Henry's response carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. 3 years of being invisible. People say things around janitors they'd never say around equals. After a while, you start to notice patterns that matter. By 6 a.m., the investigation had moved to Sterling Tech's corporate offices, and James Patterson had indeed vanished completely. Passport, offshore accounts, corporate access codes, everything professionally scrubbed by someone who'd planned for this contingency. But the FBI had recovered enough evidence to confirm both the assassination plot and the underlying financial crimes that had motivated it. Catherine found Henry in the executive break room, still wearing his janitor's uniform but somehow looking different, less invisible, more like the military officer he'd once been. "How's Zoe?" Henry asked, accepting the coffee Catherine offered with hands that barely trembled. "Asleep in my office. She asked if she could stay with me while you finish with the investigators." Catherine's voice carried a warmth that had nothing to do with crisis-induced gratitude and everything to do with genuine affection. "She's remarkable, Henry. You've raised an extraordinary child under impossible circumstances." The compliment settled around Henry's heart like sunrise after the longest night of winter. Validation from someone whose opinion actually mattered. "The FBI wants to offer you a consulting position," Catherine said, settling into the chair across from him. "Corporate security analysis. Apparently, there aren't many people with your combination of military training and 3 years of inside corporate observation." Henry studied Catherine's face, looking for hidden agendas or professional calculations. "And what do you want to offer me?" he asked quietly. Catherine's smile transformed her entire appearance, washing away years of corporate armor to reveal the woman beneath. "A chance to do what you're already doing, but with proper recognition and compensation. Head of Corporate Security, Sterling Tech. Salary commensurate with someone who saves CEOs from assassination attempts, plus full benefits and a signing bonus large enough to secure Zoe's college education." The offer hung between them like a bridge spanning the gap between their old lives and whatever came next. "There's something else," Catherine continued, her voice softer now. "Something personal that has nothing to do with corporate restructuring or security protocols." Henry waited, sensing the weight of unspoken words. "My daughter Rachel is coming home from boarding school next month for the first time in 2 years." The confession carried layers of pain and hope that Henry recognized from his own journey through loss and healing. "I realized last night that I have no idea how to be a mother to a 16-year-old who's essentially raised herself," Catherine continued. "I'm not asking you to fix my relationship with my daughter, Henry. I'm asking if you'd be willing to teach me how to be the kind of parent who puts family first, even when it costs everything." The request settled around Henry's heart with surprising warmth, recognition that Catherine understood the true value of what he'd built with Zoe. Outside the break room windows, Seattle was fully awake now, bustling with the energy of millions of people pursuing their dreams while remaining blissfully unaware of the drama that had unfolded 40 floors beneath their feet. Henry thought about Kelly, who'd always believed that second chances were gifts to be treasured rather than feared. I think we might be able to help each other figure that out, he said carefully, and Catherine's smile could have powered the building's entire electrical grid. Does this mean you're accepting both offers, professional and personal? I'm accepting the partnership, Henry corrected gently. In every sense of the word. The phrase carried promise and possibility, the recognition that their lives had become intertwined by more than shared danger or professional necessity. 3 months later, Henry Thompson stood in the corner office that had once been just another room to clean, watching Seattle's skyline through windows that now framed his new life, instead of just reflecting his old losses. The transformation still surprised him sometimes, from invisible janitor to head of corporate security, from struggling single father to partner in rebuilding a family scattered by ambition and tragedy. The quarterly security report shows all systems green, he told Catherine, who sat behind her desk reviewing financial statements that no longer held unpleasant surprises. All employees re-vetted, building systems upgraded, and I've established ongoing relationships with FBI and Homeland Security for threat assessment. The work felt meaningful in ways his old military assignments never had, protecting people he cared about, building something positive instead of just preventing destruction. Any word on Patterson? Catherine asked, though her tone suggested the question was purely professional curiosity rather than genuine concern. Interpol spotted someone matching his description in the Cayman Islands last month, but he's effectively vanished into whatever new identity money can buy, Henry replied. The Swiss accounts were closed and transferred as promised. As far as the world is concerned, James Patterson died in a boating accident off Barbados. Justice sometimes wore unexpected faces, Henry had learned. Sometimes the most perfect punishment was simply allowing someone to disappear into the consequences of their own choices, carrying the weight of their crimes into whatever exile they'd purchased with stolen money. The office door opened with the confident energy of a 16-year-old who'd finally learned that some adults could be trusted with teenage confidences. Rachel Sterling entered, carrying her backpack, and the kind of enthusiasm that came from spending an afternoon with someone who actually listened to her problems. "Catherine, Dad, guess what happened at school today?" she announced, and Henry still felt wonder every time she called him Dad, not as replacement for the father she'd barely known, but as recognition of the man who'd taught her mother how to be present for the people who mattered. "Tell us everything," Catherine said, her executive mask dissolving into genuine maternal interest, a transformation that amazed Henry even after 3 months of practice. "Mr. Rodriguez said my essay about corporate ethics was the best he'd read in 15 years of teaching. Jenny Morrison asked if I wanted to run for student council, and I got accepted to volunteer at the Children's Hospital on weekends." Each accomplishment carried the weight of a teenager finally secure enough in family love to risk engaging with the wider world. She pulled a drawing from her backpack, more sophisticated than Zoe's 8-year-old artwork but carrying the same emotional honesty. 4 stick figures stood in front of a tall building, labeled in careful teenage handwriting. Dad, Catherine, Rachel, and Zoe. The family portrait represented a truth that transcended biology or legal documentation. People who'd chosen each other, who'd built something stronger than DNA, through shared commitment and unconditional love. "Where's Zoe?" Catherine asked, noting the presence of her unofficial younger daughter in the artistic representation. "Piano lesson until 5, then we're all having dinner at that Italian place downtown. The one where Zoe pretends she's sophisticated enough for real Parmesan cheese," Rachel replied with the affectionate exasperation of an older sister. Their Tuesday night family dinners had become sacred ritual, proof that the most important meetings weren't scheduled in conference rooms, but happened around restaurant tables, where 8-year-olds could ask 16-year-olds about high school drama. "Speaking of Zoe," Catherine said, "her teacher called today about parent-teacher conferences next week." The phrase parent-teacher conferences carried layers of meaning that had nothing to do with academic performance and everything to do with official recognition of their unconventional family structure. "Parents, plural?" Henry asked, and Catherine's response carried the warmth of absolute certainty. "Mrs." Anderson specifically requested that both of Zoe's parents attend. Apparently, our daughter has been telling everyone about her bonus mom, who helps with math, homework, and knows the best bedtime stories. The transformation in their lives still felt miraculous some days. 6 months ago, Henry had been invisible, cleaning offices and raising his daughter alone in the aftermath of loss that had redefined everything he thought he understood about purpose and possibility. Catherine had been isolated by success, building corporate empires while her personal relationships crumbled under the weight of professional ambition. Now they were partners in every sense, professional collaborators who'd learned to trust each other's expertise, parents who'd discovered that love multiplied rather than divided when shared, and two people who'd found second chances in the most unexpected places. Outside the office windows, Seattle hummed with life and possibility. Millions of people pursuing dreams while remaining unaware of the quiet revolution that had transformed a corporate tower into something resembling home. In the distance, piano music drifted from the building's community room, where Zoe practiced scales with the determined concentration she'd inherited from both her father and her chosen mother. The sound carried promise and continuity, proof that families could be rebuilt from fragments of broken lives by people brave enough to believe in love after loss. Henry's radio crackled with routine security reports. All quiet, all normal, all safe. Just the way it should be for people who'd learned that the most important security wasn't technological or tactical, but emotional and relational. The Guardian's watch continued, but now it protected something worth saving. A family that had chosen itself, a love that had grown from crisis into something permanent and beautiful, and the recognition that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply show up for the people who mattered most. The corporate tower had become more than workspace or battlefield. It had become the foundation for lives rebuilt on trust, sacrifice, and the revolutionary idea that human worth wasn't measured by title or salary, but by the courage to protect others when everything was at stake. And 40 floors below, in a parking garage that had once hosted attempted murder, cars sat peacefully in neat rows, holding only the echo of the night, when everything changed, and two strangers learned that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choice, commitment, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people to save each other.